everybody. I'm Gina Piccolo, and this is my Astrology of 2021 presentation. And I'm really excited to be able to share with you what's coming up because it is going to be a dynamic year. We are going to have a lot of things in flux. So, it's a good time to be sort of flexible and open to, I would say, serendipity. All right, so I'm going to move along here and start the presentation. Here we go. All right. All right, so you can record portions of this and post it. I just ask that you give me credit. So feel free to do screenshots or even record whatever you want. All right, so first I want to say congratulations. We all have survived 2020. And the worst part is past us now. It's not that everything is all unicorns and rainbows, but it is going to get better. And I'm just going to do a little review of what this year was with Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. It was intense, it was scary, and it brought to light all of these archetypes of Capricorn and this Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter in Capricorn, which are quite intense and grim. We saw a stock market crash comparable to the worst that this country has ever seen. We had mass riots and uprisings in response to, very clear injustices, but it was chaotic there last summer. And I'm going to talk more about that further into the webinar. We had epic natural disasters that just seemed to get more biblical as the months went by. And we had the lockdowns and the travel bans, which required us to really look at how we socialize and what the structures of our society look like in a very strange new ways. And I'm going to talk about that as well. So this is what I want to say is the worst is over. We finally have these vaccines coming forward. We finally have a new administration that takes science more seriously, and we can expect a much different, a much more progressive, optimistic vibe as we move forward. So I thought it would be a good time to just center ourselves before I move into breaking open your consciousness with some of this other stuff. So I'd just like us all to take a long, deep, slow breath in and exhale it slowly. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And let's just all be here in this moment if we can. All right, so this is the beginning of, or the end and the beginning of major epic periods in history. And astrology has looks to alignments to sort of give us the bookmarks or the end markers of these. The things that are coming online literally Monday not only end a 20-year cycle and begin a new 20-year cycle. That's Jupiter and Saturn in the same sign, but they are beginning and ending a new 200-year cycle. That's Jupiter and Saturn in the air element, and ending an 800-year cycle. That's Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius for the first time in 800 years. So Jupiter and Saturn are planets that we look to for, indicators of what the culture is going to be doing, where the priorities are. And Jupiter and Saturn usually shift into the same sign every, not the same sign. They move together. I'm sorry. They move together into the same sign every 20 years. But the interesting thing is that they change the series of elements that they will meet in. So for example, for 200 years, they were meeting in earth signs. And so we saw the earth themes becoming very prominent. That is, in order to be successful, you have to be making money. That money is the way that you will have value in the society, the way that you exploit resources. So we saw, the Industrial Revolution. We saw the exploitation of the Earth's resources during this same time, and that was what was of value. And that's what's shifting now. So now the big shift is that they're shifting into a series of air signs, which changes what becomes valuable in our culture. I'm just going to close this up here. So yeah, so it moves from the Earth series into the air series on Monday. And this is a very big moment. It's the first time that we have had this kind of shift since the Middle Ages. So it's going to take us a while before we really can feel what this is doing to our day-to-day lives. You know, it's such a big shift that it's going to take years and maybe even decades to really look back and say, oh yes, that was the turning point. In history, some of the things that we saw out of the first shift, or not the first, but one of the most recent shifts from earth element to air element, was this, you know, explosion of creativity, explosion of scientific breakthrough, explosion of, you know, really mapping the globe, learning how, you know, learning education became, you know, a more open experience for human beings, or more availability of education, and the idea of personal liberty, which we just take for granted now. You know, that each individual has a right to, you know, health and happiness. That wasn't even a thing until the Middle Ages. Now, the other thing that we saw, which is not as rosy, is this shift of prosperity and growth from one part of the society to another. So from earth to air, we saw that centuries of prosperity and growth in Europe came to a halt. We did see this, you know, sweeping plagues and famines that reduced the population significantly. We saw peasant uprising, endless wars, and the Catholic Church, which had been such a essential piece of the culture, began to splinter off into different factions. The other thing that we saw, and this is even earlier, so these are two other eras that we had the shift from earth to air. We saw the fall of Rome, pretty big moment in history, and then the conquests of Alexander the Great. So it's big, and it probably does spell, in some ways, the end of the United States as we know it. This is one major signifier of the United States going through the death rebirth process. The other big signature, which I'll probably talk about later in 2021, because it's going to become exact in 2022, is that Pluto return of the United States. We're feeling it now. We're going to feel it even more intensely into late 2021 and 2022. Okay, but let's talk about what this might mean for you as an individual. This is a great time to reach for the air in your own chart. Okay, so everybody has air in their chart somewhere. Some folks have it more emphasized than others, but it's really getting creative, thinking outside the box, using your intellect to drive where you're moving forward, using that creativity, that higher mind, rather than the need to feel, you know, grounded in your material resources, right? So obviously we need money to live, but in the future, as we move forward in the decades, it's really going to be ideas that are going to be the currency of the new world or the new age. Learning how to pivot from, you know, just doing something because it makes money. That's probably not going to benefit you as swiftly during this age of Aquarius as doing something because it's the right thing to do for humanity. That's a big Aquarian theme. And doing something because it is where your, you know, where your heart longs to go in terms of your creative drive. So it's that getting in touch with that inner creator in you and using, you know, your ideas as a means of bettering the entire society. This is, again, Aquarian age kind of vibe. Another big piece of this is somewhat of a sense of instability. So, Earth is by its very nature more stable, more stagnant, more, there's not a lot of rapid shift that happens in that Earth when we're in the Earth element astrologically. Air, on the other hand, is very dynamic, very changeable. It can be somewhat unsettling in its instability, and that's something that we're going to have to get acclimated to. I mean, we definitely had a big dose of it this last summer when Saturn slipped into Aquarius for the first time in 30 years. This is something that we're going to see more and more of as the years go by. We need to be flexible. We need to broaden the scope of what we consider possible, because um, things are going to be changing faster than they have in 2 centuries, I would say. All right, so this is my fun slide about the Aquarian revolution that's coming in. So all of you who have Aquarius in a significant place in your chart are going to be experiencing this next couple of years in a pretty dramatic and noteworthy way that you will look back on and say, wow, everything changed after that year. So Saturn is the first shift into Aquarius of this next couple of years Aquarian age explosion that we're having. It shifted last Wednesday, Thursday overnight. Saturn in Aquarius is it's interesting that we had this news of the vaccines coming right on either side of this shift, because Saturn in Aquarius is a signature in history for breakthroughs in scientific efforts. We saw the Saturn in Aquarius when they had the polio vaccine, polio, sorry, not polio vaccine. We saw Saturn in Aquarius when we had the smallpox outbreaks, I believe. But it's definitely the themes of Saturn are about refining a system, checking the foundations of, and perfecting a practice. And Aquarius rules breakthroughs, and it rules scientists. It rules that genius part of the culture. It rules technology. So these are places that we could see real breakdowns to break through. The other aspect of life we could expect to change is that air travel. Aquarius rules air travel. It is Saturn has, shut down a lot of air travel. What I think we're going to see moving forward is a restructuring of the airline industry overall. Maybe there's some government support that comes in. Maybe they maybe it gets narrowed. I would say it probably does get narrowed down to a very select few airline companies, but it suggests we're see more regulation of big tech. I think we're going to see more political. The whole political process is an Aquarian themed area, and that campaign finance reform. I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a theme as we move into the next 2 years while Saturn is in Aquarius. Obviously, we saw a huge uprising in the summer when Saturn dipped into Aquarius just for a couple of months. We'll continue to see that uprising. We'll continue to see the whole concept of individual rights versus the rights of the community. And that process, that structure being tested. Now, one of the interesting things is just going back in history is looking at how Saturn in Aquarius manifested in the last couple of times that we had it. And one of the big ones, we had the March on Washington in 1993 for lesbian and gay rights that really set the tone for the next 30 years in that area. And now we have a much broader acceptance of LGBTQ. It's expanded from just lesbian and gay to a whole wide range of things that were not the norm 30 years ago in terms of the gender dynamics, relationship dynamics. And before that, we had the civil rights movement is one of the signatures of Saturn in Aquarius. So that's why I feel like we can see a next level of how the civil rights movement is going to manifest in the culture. I feel confident that at some point in the next, God, it'd be great in the next decade or the next 5 years to have some sort of reparation, something that really helps us heal in a more profound way from the whole experience and trauma and tragedy of slavery. And environmental concerns, we can expect that to become a much bigger theme as well. Back in the early 60s, we had the groundbreaking book by Rachel Carson that looked at the effects of pesticides on nature, which led to the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency. I think we can expect to see more of that moving forward in the next year and a half. So the next big piece of this is Jupiter moving into Aquarius. Jupiter shifts on actually today. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of you know I was hoping you would use this date. Jupiter in Aquarius is a much more friendly alignment for Jupiter, the planet of education, the planet of abundance, the planet of wisdom and justice. Moving into an air sign makes it much more effective, more optimistic, more excited, more open to positive change, progressive change. Aquarius is the sign of the rebel, of the genius, and the outlier. I think I'm saying that right. This is the outsider being accepted. And we can expect to see more folks that may have been pushed to the sidelines because their ideas were too weird coming into the fold and being accepted during this next couple of years, and even moving forward as we move into the age of Aquarius. One of the really big pieces of this that we could see is the complete rethinking of how we educate our society. So looking at higher education in particular, and we're seeing, most of the major colleges and universities are online because of COVID. But this change is going to probably change the way university education is offered from here forward. I also believe, and there are other astrologers, and you'll notice that in the bottom of some of these slides, I'm referencing my source for some of this. Ray Merriman is a master astrologer who's been publishing books since the 70s. He's his expertise is in financial astrology, but if any of you are interested in getting into this on more of a nerd level, I would refer you to Ray Merriman. He's amazing. He really feels that this is going to lead us into a new age of a higher education where more people are able to be educated because college education is either free or just more accessible, more affordable. One of the more recent times that we had Jupiter in Aquarius was when Obama was inaugurated, and we can look back to that as a time of great hope and this exhilarating sense of generosity of spirit, of freedom. Aquarius, Jupiter in Aquarius really expands the notion of being generous to all, not just the select few with the money, and feeling the sky is the limit. Now, these aspects of Jupiter and Aquarius in 2021 are going to be somewhat inhibited in the first quarter of the year because Jupiter and Saturn will be traveling together so closely. And when Saturn is close to Jupiter, it takes over and it's a bit more restrictive on that area of expansive freedom and generosity of spirit vibe. However, once we get past March into April, May, June, and Jupiter kind of scoots ahead of Saturn, it gets far enough away that it's able to really spread its wings and fly. And that's why I'm feeling, and a lot of astrologers are feeling, that the springtime is when some form of normalcy returns to our society and we're able to hang out together. And this is kind of my gift for that. It's like the dogs that get let out of the house after being pent up for a year. This is going to be us in March, April, May. we're really going to have a real sense of joy return to our lives. Okay. So I did this little thing last year when I was looking at the comparison of Jupiter and what it's like in different signs. This is Jupiter in Capricorn. Okay. Not super, I don't know. You can make your own judgment. This is Jupiter in Aquarius. It's just like, you know what? Yeah, we're doing it the way we want to do it. We're going to party like it's, I don't know, 1999. This is Jupiter in Capricorn, much more restrained. This is Jupiter in Aquarius. So, as a sun sign Aquarian, I will say it's going to be better. I think most people would say it's going to be better. And it's interesting to note that the folks who've been announced as members of the new cabinet, a lot of them have important signatures of Aquarius in their own charts. And this is a really cool part of the Aquarian vibe that I think we're going to see is intentional communities. Now, we've all had to find our little pods, our little groups of people, our bubbles during the quarantine. And this is something that we're going to see probably expand and grow over the next 2 centuries, really. I think we're going to find that the neighborhoods, what people used to call communes, but that are now called pods or bubbles or intentional communities, these are going to be more important to us because we're going to see that it feels safer, it feels more nurturing to have a small group of people that we just invest all of our time, money, and heart into. Now, one of the things that seems counterintuitive when you think Aquarius, you think of hippies, you think of Age of Aquarius. However, the Aquarian vibe can be quite fascist. It is an air sign that's very cool. It is a masculine sign that's very rigid. It can denote a time when belief systems become we are in our silos of belief, right? So that you see more radicalization of existing belief systems. And you're probably going to see that on either side. It is important to note that we had the rise of Hitler in a Saturn in Aquarius timeframe. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to have another Hitler. However, we're already seeing the rise of the Proud Boys and that movement becoming more radicalized, becoming more violent. And I do think that domestic terrorism is going to be a real threat moving forward in 2021. The other big thing that's a little bit more optimistic and interesting is androgyny, or the idea of non-binary gender, that becoming more of a norm in the similar sense to how we, the last time we had Saturn in Aquarius, we were more accepting of non-traditional or unconventional partnerships. I think we're going to see that go to the next level as we move forward into the next 2 years, but definitely into this whole air sign theme. And then I thought it would be interesting to just kind of find some influencers, newsmakers who have significant Aquarian placements. I think we're going to hear a lot more from Obama next year, Oprah as well. And I think, AOC, she's going to be a force to be reckoned with moving forward. But I thought it was weird that Ivana Trump showed up in my research. I don't know that she's necessarily going to be a big influencer, but we may see her come forward. And strangely, Marla Maples also has an interesting Aquarian signature. We may see some of these women that were affiliated with Trump. Maybe they come forward and they start sharing some things they haven't shared. I don't know. It's also noteworthy that Jeff Bezos is going to be having his Saturn return next year, and Saturn returns generally are times of pivotal change. The change can be difficult. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of the hammer coming down on Amazon, as it probably will with Google and Facebook too. I think that regulation piece of it is going to be very important. And we see that Mitch McConnell is going to have Jupiter and Saturn on Venus and Mercury. I don't know what to say about him. But I don't think he's going away next year. Okay, moving forward, one of the other interesting signatures that Ray Merriman points out, and I should say Ray is a very accurate astrologer. He's very diligent about tracking his own accuracy. And he noticed that there was a similar signature during the tech bust in the early 2000s. We're going to have a similar signature in February, June, and December of 2021. So if you have investments in the tech industry, that's something to keep in mind. So what we'll have is not only Jupiter, Saturn, but we'll have those two square Uranus. And these archetypes really have to do with disruptions in the currency and markets, but particularly in sectors ruled by Uranus and Aquarius, which are technology. One of the other really interesting pieces of this coming year is that that the internet is going to be having, or the World Wide Web, I should say. And the World Wide Web and the internet are considered two different things in astrology. One has a birth chart, the internet has a birth chart in the late 60s. The World Wide Web, however, it was kind of invented in the late 80s, but was made public at a very specific time in August 1991 that we can chart as the birth time of, the internet as we know it. So we could probably see some really kind of rocky times where our connection is concerned. That's why I thought it was funny when I was talking about that and my Zoom link crashed. I think we could see more crashes, more security breaches on a larger scale coming up in 2021 and 2020, all the way through March 2023. All right, so let's bring this down to the individual level. What does this mean for you? I would say, definitely where we're directing our efforts, where we're working the hardest, wherever Saturn happens to be in your chart, that's changing. It brings in a new paradigm, it brings in a new worldview personally. That means we all have to pivot and look at our goals and plans in a new light and modify those accordingly. Again, flexibility is going to be very, very key during this coming year. If you have a lot of fixed signs in your chart, that's a little bit harder than if you have a lot of mutable signs. But you really do want to tune in to the now, when things are changing, when things are very hectic and chaotic, which during the coming year, with the alignments we have, we could see some real moments that are quite unsettling. I feel like it's a bit of a roller coaster ride coming up. So we'll have these high highs and then we'll have some crashes. And so we kind of have to stay in that middle road, knowing that these things go in cycles, knowing that we will be able to rise above it if we stay clear and we don't go into fear, which I think also it'll be a lot easier to stay optimistic next year than it has been this year. Okay, I've got this one caveat and I need to take a sip of water. I need to find my little water bottle here. One caveat about 2021 is this, and some of you have mentioned to me that you've heard not a lot, or some astrologers talking about how it's going to be worse next year than this year. No, it's not. And here's why. Yes, we're going to have this very unsettling alignment, Saturn square Uranus. Yes, it does break things apart. It can wreak some havoc. However, there's enough positive with Jupiter in Aquarius. It lifts us up. And Jupiter's going to slip into Pisces for a short time, which is going to feel even better late March through the end of July. So yes, this is going to be a little rocky, and I'm going to unpack this for you. Now, Saturn square Uranus. This is a real historic alignment that we have seen in times of revolution. The American Civil War, China's Cultural Revolution, and French Revolution. The interesting part of this is that we have the blend of two seemingly contradictory archetypes: repressiveness of Saturn with the erratic unpredictability of Uranus. What's interesting is that we have Saturn in the erratic, unpredictable sign of Aquarius, and we have Uranus in the more conventional, I don't want to say Taurus is repressive, but it's an earth sign, so it's much more stubborn, resistant. And so when those two come together in a conflicting alignment as they are in 2021, we see things like sudden financial and economic collapses. Now, we had a sudden financial and economic collapse in 2020. Saturn and Uranus were very, they were in a wide square, but this element was already building. What happens in 2021 is they get much closer. So that theme of financial economic collapse could become more more devastating. I don't think it's necessarily going to mean a Great Depression, but it does suggest to me that you want to be very mindful of how you invest your money and very mindful now about how you save your money. So it's not a good year to take financial risk. That's for sure. Because I think largely we're going to have civil unrest. And when we have civil unrest, the markets don't like that. So it's going to be this sort of turbulent time where some amazing things are going to happen, but it's also going to be somewhat chaotic at times. We saw this alignment in the aftermath of the Nixon Watergate scandal and the Nixon resignation, where the trust of the people had been violated. And so there was just a lot of people were it was a volatile time. It was a volatile time. If you remember, that was a time where we had a lot of airline hijackings. There was a lot of domestic terrorism in the 70s that led to how we do airline security now. We could see that kind of thing going on. Yeah, so it's like the leadership lets down the public and the public rebels in response. That's one of the ways that we're already seeing that. I mean, I don't think this is going to be like a big surprise to any of us. We're already seeing the response of the Trump supporters to the election of Biden, and it is not pretty, and it's probably going to get worse. We saw this during the American Civil War, and what's when we talk about these contradictory elements clashing, I think this Richard Tarnas puts it in a really interesting way. You saw the states secede from the Union because they wanted to continue with their own repressive. They felt their freedoms were being their freedom to repress the slaves was being inhibited. So it's kind of this paradox of themes there. And so they decided to secede from the Union as a result. Now, the good news about this clash is it sharpens this drive. Now, the thing about squares is that they motivate. And so there's this motivating energy to find new technology that disrupts an old, outmoded way of being. So we could see breakthroughs in the socio-political environment. We could see breakthroughs scientifically and in technology. We could see breakthroughs in the rights of the underprivileged, social reforms. But because these are going to be so groundbreaking, there is going to be a response of fighting that breakthrough. There's a huge clash this coming year between the progressives and the conservatives. And what comes out of that is going to be something kind of in the middle, but for the time being, the next couple of years is going to be kind of a battle. Now, this is another piece that Ray Merriman mentions that I really perked up and noticed. He writes a 200-page book every year about the astrology, and he mentions that there's a really clear signature of an economic decline that I really want to pass on to everyone, just so that in moving forward next year, it's not a time to take big risks financially or to put yourself out in the hopes of a big bounce in the markets. It's going to be rocky. There will be money to be made, but you're going to have to be really, really keen on how to use the markets to make money. You would definitely need a financial astrologer and a really good market analysts to do that. Now, another key theme that's happening next year is Neptune square the nodes. I see this as sort of a secondary, but it is significant. It was happening this year. It continues to happen next year. This is where we're seeing this rise in conspiracy theories, this rise in delusional thinking around what's reality, what isn't reality, what's true, what's not true. At the same time, wishes can be granted at this time. It can be that time of the mythic great awakening. So there's this mixed bag next year where the stakes feel really high, where we're able to imagine a better future and make it real. But at the same time, we're going to have to battle with our own over idealizations and battle with our sense of what is real and what is not. So it is a little bit of an uphill climb, but the peak and the success that's possible is kind of mind-blowingly awesome. So it's there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of growth possibility there, a lot of consciousness shifting happening. And at the same time, there's a lot of turmoil and turbulence. Okay, and I thought it was interesting to know we have all three of these elements. We have Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter conjunct and amplified with the Sun and Mercury. We have Saturn square Uranus, amplified by Mars, and we have Neptune square the nodes. So it is interesting that all this is happening on January 20th on Inauguration Day. And if you've been in my classes before, you know that a lot of astrologers are not seeing this as a viable day to have the president sworn in. I do expect that we'll have violence on that day. I do expect there will be massive protests and the possibility of having to postpone that inauguration. So we will see. Okay, that is the end of this part of the presentation. Now what I was going to do is pull up the charts and look at each, hold on, let me get my new share going here. And I have to open a new software here. Hold on one second. Look at each chart to see how this is, dig a little bit deeper into how this is affecting each sign. And I want to just put it out there to everyone. Does anybody have, I'm going to look at the chat here to see if there were any questions that came up. Okay. Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Feel free to just pipe up. I'm going to take a minute and sip some water here after listening to that. Is there anything that comes up for you that you want a little bit more information on? Nope. Okay. I can't believe I got through all of that in 45 minutes, and we had a technological snafu. Let's see. Nina's asking, when you were talking about Aquarius, was it sign or rising sign? So Aquarius appears in your chart somewhere. I think, Nina, you're an Aquarius rising. So this is a pretty epic year for you. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the horoscopes. Aquarius in general, though, is a theme. So because we have these cultural planets, Jupiter, Saturn, moving into the sign of Aquarius in the sky, and as Dave Gregg has been posting on his Instagram, the pictures of, you can actually see it in the sky out in California because it's so clear. We haven't had that much clarity here in Nashville. But, this is the alignment that everyone is experiencing. But Aquarius rising and Aquarius sun, moon, you're experiencing it even bigger. So yes, it's something we all experience. And if you happen to have Aquarius in your chart in some notable place, you will notice it even more. So I hope that answers your question. All right, let's talk about Aries and Aries rising. And I pulled up I've decided to use the January 20th date for all of the signs, because we have all three of these things in effect happening at that time. Aries and Aries rising, you're experiencing the big Aquarian age shift in the area of your dreams and hopes, your goals, and also your alliances. So this is a time where you're really maybe conflicted about, how do my values and the way I see my own worth conflict with what is going on in the society and with my established friendships, my established alliances, what needs to change around those areas. So these are the areas that you're going to have the most breakthrough, the most conflict, the most focus on working through. So you're more motivated to look at where do my values, personal values, conflict with the values of my society, my community, my friendships. The other big piece of this is that Neptune squaring the nodes. And so this is a huge moment for Aries rising to look at, your deepest connection to the divine, your belief systems, what you know to be true, and what you absolutely don't know. It's this real moment of crisis of faith, but also an opportunity to explore why you believe what you believe, and kind of take that apart and figure out what pieces of your belief system don't really make sense to you anymore, and what you want to learn more about, so that you can create a more authentic belief system, authentic or a more grounded faith in something. So that's Neptune square the nodes for Aries and Aries rising. I'm going to do these a little bit quicker just because I want to get through everybody's sign. But again, if you have questions as I'm giving these, please just unmute yourself and just shout it out, because that way I can hear you, and I'm perfectly fine being interrupted. All right, I'm going to go to Taurus and Taurus rising now. And just take a quick sip of water here. So Taurus and Taurus rising, this is a major change in your professional life, in your status, and in your reputation. And I would say change in a large degree for the better. This is a moment of recognition, a moment of gaining awards, gaining status, really being seen for the groundbreaking thinker that you are. And it's also a time that feels somewhat unsettling, because you might not be used to this level of visibility, or this level of showing up in your authenticity, showing up in a unique way, being yourself, without any artifice, and just kind of letting the chips fall where they may. Like it's sort of that sense of not really worrying as much about whether your unconventional way of being is in line with what your boss approves. You're just ready to be who you are, and also stand up for, a cause. There's a feeling with Aquarius at the top of the chart that what you do has to have some benefit for the larger humanity. And this coming year, you have an opportunity to really step into that, to really do something that feels like it's serving a bigger cause, a bigger something more meaningful than just being recognized for an achievement. But this is an achievement that means something to the larger whole. With Neptune in the 11th and square the nodes, this is confusion around, where do I belong? And I think that that's kind of a crisis that you've been dealing with a bit for, the last couple of years with Uranus in the first house. With Neptune squaring that from the 11th, it's about, how do I value what I have to give, and where are my gifts most valuable, and what groups do I need to belong to share what I have, and what do I have to let go of, what is ready to dissolve, what is ready to disappear, in terms of my friendships, in terms of my goals and dreams, what just is not really effective for me in those areas, and what is making money and what isn't making money for me. How you earn a living, Taurus and Taurus rising, and whether that professional endeavor is meaningful enough is really going to be a strong theme for you in 2021. And it does say that you're actually going to be rewarded in your income for standing in your truth. You'll be rewarded for being authentic. So don't shy away from challenging authority, because I feel like that's where you actually get rewarded, even though it sounds somewhat counterintuitive. All right, I'm going to move on to Gemini and Gemini rising, and feel free to pipe in and comment or question anything that I'm talking about as I go through this. So Gemini and Gemini rising, you're looking at all of this Aquarius in the house of your higher mind, learning and teaching, renewing your faith in yourself and in the fact that you're on the right path. This is a time where you really get a chance to share what you know and to be seen as an expert in your field, maybe in a bigger way, to be I feel like it's a renewal of your connection with something much bigger than you, like being able to bridge some sort of cultural gap between two different fields, between two different cultures that you belong to, between, because Jupiter rules the midheaven for Gemini, and Geminis are known for doing two things at once. They are very good at pursuing and actually prefer pursuing two different paths at the same time. And during this next year, you really get an opportunity to enjoy that, to enjoy working in two different realms, but then also being able to bridge those two different realms, and to find a great deal of satisfaction bringing all these disparate parts of yourself into the fold so that you feel more whole, and more complete. Having Neptune in that place of professional endeavor is a really creative place, a really imaginative place. It can also cause some confusion. It can cause some disillusionment as it squares the north and south nodes. So your partnerships, you may find that some of your professional partnerships are ready to dissolve, and that's okay, because what you're moving into is something much more aligned with where you need to be. Having eclipses on the 1st and 7th house, as Geminis and Sagittarius are having this year and next year, you're in a pivotal place. You're in a transitional place, Gemini, where things are going to, some people are going to leave your life and new people are coming in. And so you really need to just allow that to happen, allow that shift to happen. And I can see with Uranus and Mars in the 12th, there is this spiritual restlessness happening. There's this, maybe it's a crisis of faith, a crisis of consciousness, but in that crisis, there is opportunity for real transcendence. These are all key words for Aquarius and Uranus: transcendence and crisis. It's like they're part of the same whole. So it's a very dynamic time for Geminis to open their minds. I would say if you're inclined to do psychedelics, Geminis, you might want to do that, because there's this amazing ability to tap the consciousness for Geminis and Gemini risings during this time. But if you're a client of mine, you definitely want to let me give you dates to do psychedelics. Don't just go out to the desert and drop acid. Let me know, because I want to help you choose the right date for that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Cancer and Cancer risings. So Cancer, this alignment of Aquarian energy is happening in the house of intimacy and shared resources. And it's lining up with Uranus and Mars in that house of alliances and goals. So it could be that you are really ready to restructure your financial arrangements, any investments you have, any inheritances. These kinds of things could be realigned in a way that maybe they serve a community you belong to. Maybe you are looking at long-term goals in a completely unconventional way. How am I going to use the money that I've inherited or that I've saved or that I share with a partner? How am I going to use that to serve my community? How am I going to use that to maybe uplift society in some bigger way? So those are the 11th and 8th house um, areas. Now, when we look at intimacy, 8th house as a house of intimacy, how can I be more engaged, involved with activism? How can I be more intimately invested in the societal change that's going on? What can I do to make more of a difference with larger groups of people? So it's almost like you want to get more involved on a ground level with these epic societal changes going on with activism, with social causes that you believe in. And with that Neptune in the ninth, so Gemini had all of that Aquarius in the ninth. Cancer has Neptune in the ninth, and it's squaring the nodes in the 12th and 6th house. There's some overlap in how Gemini and Cancer are experiencing what's going on, because there is a real it's like your faith or your connection to a higher consciousness, Cancer, is in conflict with your day-to-day routines and your ability to surrender to what is. So your Cancer is really having to maybe realign what they believe in, so that it's something that you can make a daily habit, so that your spiritual practices become part of your day-to-day, and they allow you to surrender. One of the things about Cancer rising, they really like to have control. And with this Neptune alignment, it's asking you to reconsider what you take control of and where you can surrender and let go of control. That there may be opportunity in being able to find that spiritual practice that allows you to feel more comfortable surrendering. So those are big themes for Cancer and Cancer rising. And I would say, I think almost all of you are my clients. And if you have a Cancer sun or Cancer rising, we've talked about elements of this. And they're being, in our sessions, we get much more personal, but I'm just doing sort of a broader brush on how these epic alignments are affecting each decan or zodiac sign. So let's go to Leo and Leo rising, and this is all about partnership. So Leo and Leo rising, you've had a lot of effort trying to streamline your daily processes, streamline where your habits are concerned, where your business or any entrepreneurial efforts that you had, been putting a lot of effort in that, and it's been kind of a lonely go. You've been doing all of it on your own. Now all of this shift of Jupiter Saturn is like, you can ask for help. You can bring in experts in some of these fields that you've been trying to learn yourself. You can begin to partner with other people so that you can level up. That's one of the things that Leo and Leo rising is probably ready to do this year, but have been trying to do ever since probably mid 2018, because Uranus moved into that house of recognition, house of status, house of professional endeavor, and it just kind of like broke through. So Leo and Leo rising has been on a kind of a trajectory to reinventing themselves professionally for the last few years. And this year, you really find that in order to push through even further, you're going to have to make some alliances with some other people that have expertise that maybe you just don't have, but that you really value. So that would be one thing I would say you can expect from that Saturn, Jupiter, and Aquarius, and the Mars and the Uranus in the 10th. With Neptune in the 8th house, it's not a great time to be trying to make investments. It's better to probably save. So even though you may be, maybe your partner's making more money this year, maybe you start to do quite well, it's better to sock that away than it is to try and take risks with any shared resources that you have with a business partner. Because Neptune in the 8th house is like investing in quicksand or investing in some of that swampland in Florida. It's just not a great alignment. With the Neptune squaring the nodes in the 11th and the 5th, for Leo rising, this has to do with confronting your alliances and confronting your, how they support or do not support your own creative endeavors. It is a very imaginative, so it feels like you're very motivated to set new creative goals. You're very motivated to maybe even change the way that you create, but you're really going to have to work with other people this year, Leo and Leo rising. It's like your goals are going to be dependent on the alliances that you make. And it does suggest that you make some really influential alliances. Some of the people that you meet this year can really help you kind of rocket ahead, accelerate your personal growth in a way that you haven't had. And you probably got some hints of this in the summer and just through this last eclipse series of, oh, there are people out there who can help me, who want to help me. You'll see more of that into 2021. What else do I want to say about that? And this is also a big year for your partner. So if your partner, and we're talking life partner here, if your partner is involved in something, they could be rewarded, they could see success, they could find that the hard work of the last 3 years is starting to pay off, which is always really nice. Okay, any questions on any of that so far? I'm just going to move on to Virgo and Virgo rising. So Virgo and Virgo rising, you're dealing with this Aquarian alignment in the house of day-to-day routines, health and well-being, and work. So this becomes a year of, streamlining a lot of your processes in your work life, in your day-to-day life, making things more functional so that you can achieve more, because you're scheduled to really be achieving during the Saturn, the Sag Gemini Aquarius, the Sag Gemini eclipse cycle that started last summer and goes all the way into Christmas of 2021. You're able to sort of harness your work routines and get your arms around your work routines so that you can achieve and next level your own professional endeavors. So that's really positive for Virgo and Virgo rising. At the same time, you may be having a crisis of faith, and that could be that you're really working really hard and you have to change what you believe in order to be as effective as you want to be. This is also faith in yourself. So Uranus in that 9th house does give you the opportunity to break through as a teacher, as a spiritual advisor, as a guru, as a person of great wisdom. But there is a part of this Saturn square that requires you to maybe get over the fact that it doesn't have to be perfect. You can be a wise person who's worthy of being a teacher and not have it exactly right. And I think that's something Virgo rising and Virgo folks kind of struggle with. Oh, I can't do this thing or that thing until I get the next certification or learn to be perfect or figure it out so that it's exactly right. this is a year for trying things out, testing the waters and moving forward as you gain more information. It doesn't mean that you have to wait and hone these things to make them absolutely perfect. So you'll have to work a little bit against that inclination of perfectionism, Virgo, to achieve what you want to achieve this year. And when you do that, when you allow yourself to be good enough, that's when you really things really start to move forward for you. Because having all that Aquarian energy in the sixth house is also a lot of mentor energy. Being able to harness what you already know and recognize the value of what you already know, without feeling like you need to reach some sort of exalted place that you'll never get to. Like, enough to be successful in this next year, and you'll get indications of that when the eclipse cycle starts to activate in May, June. What else do I want to say about the sixth house? So the other big piece of this, Virgo, is you got to take care of your health or you're going to stress out and burn out. That's it. There's just no compromise. You cannot neglect your health in this coming year. You have to take care of your health, particularly areas of digestion. That's sixth house issues. I think I've mentioned that in some of the horoscopes I've been doing weekly. But yeah, that's a big piece for Virgo rising. All right, let's move on to Libra and Libra rising. And this is, I have said this before, but the air signs really do have an advantage. Air and fire do have a bit of an advantage in 2021 because of this alignment. But we'll all be experiencing the more exalted aspects of Saturn, Jupiter. So culturally, having Saturn, Jupiter in an air sign is better for all of us. It just happens to better the air and fire a little bit more. So Libra and Libra rising, this is all about pleasure, which I know you're going to love hearing. Having all that alignment in the fifth house is really enjoying yourself for a change, really taking time out to nourish that inner child, because that inner child is ready to create on a bigger scale, maybe than you ever have in your life. This could be create by making babies, or it could be create by actually creating, digging into some ambitious project. So it is a really, significant shift into a place from being super responsible for your family and moving into, hey, but what do I want to do? What brings me pleasure and joy? So that's one of the really beautiful aspects for Libra and Libra rising. There is a conflict, and this is the conflict we're all dealing with the Saturn Uranus square, between your intimacy maybe with a partner and your intimacy with yourself. Where are the boundaries there? Where do I, how do I balance that? This could also have to do with maybe digging into old traumas. The eighth house is a place we often store trauma, and with Uranus kicking around in that part of the chart for years until like 2025, but then squaring off with Saturn, Jupiter, it's like, okay, here's the reason why I never feel like I'm entitled to joy. It's this trauma that I haven't dealt with yet, but that I'm waking up to. So it's an awesome time, Libra, for you to be in therapy, to be working through some of this stuff, because Uranus is the great awakener, and it's asking you to look at yourself on a deeper level, particularly where trauma is concerned. The other piece of this, the Neptune square the nodes from the sixth, this is about your health and well-being, and really looking at, am I spacing out where my health and well-being is concerned? And is it infecting how I see the world? Am I so unclear on how to take care of my body that it's disabling my ability to have a clear perspective. So this too, in the same way that the Saturn Jupiter is in the 6th for Virgo and Virgo rising, having Neptune in the 6th for Libra and Libra rising, it's important for you to look at your health, because that's a place where you may be dissociating from. Maybe this last year was so hard that you just haven't had the bandwidth to focus on getting in shape or feeling better. But that the more you dissociate from your own body, Libra and Libra rising, the more you're actually losing touch with your worldview, your perspective on life, where you actually want to direct your life, what your ideas are. So it almost feels like this would be kind of a classic signature for brain fog. Brain fog because you're not taking care of your digestive tract, the 6th house. Something to think about, Libras. And if you're a client of mine and this is resonating, let's talk about that in our next session. Okay. Libra. Okay, now we're going to Scorpio and Scorpio rising. Okay, Scorpio, this is a big chunk of energy moving into that area of home and family, of where you physically live, of what grounds you. How can you feel really grounded and centered in who you are? This is also taking an inventory. Saturn it takes 30 years for Saturn to move around the zodiac. And the last 15 years, Scorpio has been, working from a place of, high achievement 15 years ago, to looking at his or her associations, to maybe taking some time to let go and really grieve a loss, to moving back into an area of wisdom and putting yourself out there, but feeling your age, to struggling with, self-confidence, to now moving into perfecting ideas. Now it moves into the bottom of the chart and you have reached a turning point. So from this moment, for the next 15 years, Scorpio, you're moving into a whole new paradigm, a whole new level of achievement. You're moving up, but you really are going to spend the next 2 years looking at yourself with a microscope. Saturn in the 4th house and Jupiter being there too in 2021, beautiful time again to go to therapy. The 8th and the 4th house, these are good times to look at ourselves when we have heavy transits there. And Saturn is a heavy transit. But what happens is you get really clear on what parts of your childhood you're really ready to let go of, what parts of you have matured and are ready to blossom in a whole new way. Having this in a square alignment to Uranus in the 7th, it could directly impact your relationships. So the work you do on yourself, the work you do to organize your own home life, the work you do on the relationships with your relatives, with your family of origin, is going to directly impact breakthroughs in your life partnerships, business partnerships, the kind of people that you draw into your life, all the 7th house issues. So yes, it's a significant turning point, and there are a lot of gifts to be reaped or given in this time of taking that inventory, and embracing new parts of your own identity that may have gone underground or that may have been in hibernation for the last 30 years. So Neptune in the 5th is really in nice alignment with the Scorpio decan, and it's in that house of creativity, and it's in conflict with, or it is motivating change in areas of intimacy and areas of self-worth. So this, to me, in a psychological paradigm, is really inner child work, is really nurturing the inner child, because that inner child wants to create and feels so hungry for creating, but it's not 100% confident that it can do it. And it kind of needs some psychological excavation, 8th house, North Node, that it will get in 2021. There's an awakening I mean, I would say Scorpio, this is a time of awakening, great awakening on a deep psychological level that sort of heralds a new creative time, a new creative output, because you're actually ready to value yourself in a new way. Um, and this lights up the most important parts of your chart: your relationship with your life partner, your inner child, your relationship with your family of origin, and your sense of self-worth, and how that's going to reflect in your intimacy in a positive way. So it's more of a inner work year for Scorpio rising, less of a super achievement time, but positive and transcendent all the same. So that sounds good. I have a Scorpio rising in my life that will like to hear that. All right. I'm going to move on to Sag and Sag rising. And Sag, this is a whole new perspective on life, a whole new perspective on yourself. This is expanding into areas that you didn't expect to socially, finding new people to get to know in your community, bringing new people in that are refreshing and aligned with that need of you to explore different cultures and be adventurous, socially adventurous. It really is a dynamic time for you in your, making friends and bringing new people in, and you could see this really start to blossom when we get into that first quarter of next year and even into early spring. um and that part of you that's ready to meet new people and socialize, I mean, we are all really hungry for that, is going to be in conflict or is motivating change in that area of health and well-being and daily routines. So it feels like to me your daily routines are scheduled to change pretty dramatically. And it's the social dynamic that motivates that change. So maybe you are meeting new people who create new routines in your life, or you create new routines that bring in new people. But it definitely feels like a breath of fresh air in the way you see the world, a refreshing perspective. And now when we look at Neptune and what Neptune is doing in the fourth house, where you live and how that family dynamic relates to your relationship with yourself and others is a little confusing. There may be some maybe there's some disillusionment with a family member that affects a partnership. Maybe you are ready to let go of a habitual way of being in your family, and as you do that, it allows you to completely change your behavior in relationships. And this, I'm hearing myself, and there's some echoing of what's going on with Scorpio. But I'm talking about the fourth house, and I'm talking about the first and seventh house. Scorpio is experiencing the fourth house with different planets. Neptune in the fourth house for Sag. There could be a little bit of melancholy there. There could be a little bit of you know, maybe over idealizing the past, because the fourth house represents the past, and the first and seventh house is being triggered by those north and south nodes. There is a lot of I want to say maybe nostalgia for the past, and a recognition that in order to move forward into the future and step into a new way of being in the world, you're going to have to reckon with that past. um, so it's a little bit bittersweet, I guess, is one way to put it. Um, yeah. And then we talked about the health and well-being piece of this. Yeah, we talked about the sixth house with Uranus there. Sag is really going to need to mind the stress. This is something you may have been dealing with the last 2 or 3 years, but definitely next year you may overbook yourself, and that creates some stress. And so you just want to make sure you pace yourself. That's not easy for Sag. They love to be everywhere all the time, doing everything. Next year, you have plenty of opportunity for that, but you don't want to take every invitation you're given. You want to pace yourself. All right, we're going to move on to Capricorn and Capricorn rising now. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me and just unmute yourself. All right, so Capricorn and Capricorn rising, it's been a huge year having Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter all in that first house. So a lot of the heaviness or the responsibility or the expectation on you to take care of a lot of things, that moves kind of, you get to pull some things off of your plate, Capricorn, and put them into yourself. Make more of an investment in yourself rather than being sort of this beacon of responsibility for everybody else. You get the opportunity to invest in what you need. Now, there could be, if you have children, some conflict with your kids, having to balance out what you need with what your kids are needing because you have Uranus in the 5th house. But this could also be a creative endeavor, maybe having to find ways to be creative in that breakthrough, inventive, outside the box way, while also being able to make money from it, because you'll have Saturn square Uranus from the 2nd house. So that's really a time of trying to reckon with being inventive, but being able to be inventive on a scale that people are willing to pay for, or that your boss can recognize in the salary that you earn. So that's a little bit of a piece that you'll be dealing with, when we have Saturn square Uranus, most precisely in February, June, and December of 2021. The Neptune piece in the 3rd, the 3rd house is all about how we think. It's also how we gather information and how we communicate. And this part of you has been a little blurry. That it's imaginative. So you definitely have a lot of very creative ideas that have come out of Neptune in the 3rd. But it's in conflict now, or it's motivated to change now the way that you communicate that on the job, and the way that you're willing to, I want to say, surrender some control over how people receive you. One of the things about Capricorn rising and Capricorn sun is they're generally pretty conventional, and they like to keep things inside the box. They're not outside the box, they're inside the box. And with Neptune in the 3rd, I would say that, you're being challenged also with the Aquarian age stuff. You're being challenged to be seen in a little bit of a way that is uncomfortable for you, and but is kind of required in order for you to realign your work life, your day-to-day routines in a way that feel more authentic. So that speaks to the North and South Node eclipses in that 12th and 6th house. This is also a really clear signature of mind over body, with Neptune in the 3rd, which is the mind, squaring the North Node in the 6th. This suggests this, really needing to get clear on how you think, and getting clear on that will then enable you to clarify your work life, your vocation, your routines, and your relationship with your body. So this is about, making the effort to get a clear idea of, where you happen to be in life and what that means. And that's not easy with Neptune in the 3rd. This is also a really helpful alignment for dreaming into being, so manifesting a new reality in your day-to-day routines. So Neptune in the 3rd can give you a dreamier quality, Capricorn, than you might be accustomed to. And it's been there for years. This isn't a new thing. What is new is that it's squaring off with the north and south nodes next year. So it really, like, suddenly you may have a rude awakening. You may realize, oh, I've been deluding myself about my health, or I have been deluding myself about how much control or surrender I have in my life and what that's doing to my body. So yeah, this is something, again, this is kind of murky territory, Capricorn, that you'll benefit from in the work we do, certainly, but it suggests a time where having somebody help you, having a mentor, having a teacher, having a spiritual guide could really benefit you in the next year. It just helps you work through the sort of foggy brain that you might be experiencing. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Aquarius and Aquarius rising. And so Aquarius, this is your time. This is your age of Aquarius, right? You're stepping into a new paradigm that's probably going to feel like the air that you have always been breathing, but now suddenly somebody's, what's a better analogy of that? It's like you get a big gust of oxygen in your brain that it's almost a little, you're almost a little high from it, right? Because all of the things that you have been working with, all of your life that have been outside the box, all of the things that have seemed weird or too unconventional are suddenly mainstream. So Aquarians could really, and they will be the newsmakers of this next, I want to say the next millennia, because we've got this air alignment moving through our culture for the next 800 years. Aquarians really start this off in a big way this year. So you're the groundbreakers, you're the genius folks that are, in the spotlight this year. What you've been working on behind the scenes for the last 2.5 years is now ready to be debuted. The hardships, the loss, the suffering, the things that you have had to reckon with in this sort of dark night of the soul, maybe, that with Saturn in the 12th house, that's now over, and you're ready to come out of the cave and share the wisdom that you've gained. So this is pretty dramatic for Aquarius and Aquarius risings. And the square to Saturn in the 4th house, one of the things this could be is that it, there's something has been sort of laid dormant within Aquarians with that Saturn in the 12th house for the last couple of years. And when it comes, when you wake that piece of you up, it does cause some kind of an earthquake within you. That's what Saturn square Uranus, that is another signature of Saturn square Uranus. It's earthquake energy. And it really is a little bit unsettling because you haven't been this visible in 30 years. You haven't actually ever been this visible because we've never in our lifetimes had Saturn and Jupiter in this place together. You've had Jupiter in your sign. If you've lived more than 12 years, you've had a Jupiter return, and you've had a Saturn return if you're older than 30. But having both of these line up together in such a personal place in the chart, and then square Uranus, this is the co-ruler of your sign. Those of you who are old enough, think back to the mid-90s and what was going on for you in the mid-90s. You'll have some similar themes, but amplified because Jupiter is there now. If you are old enough to remember the 70s, think back to the mid-70s. Again, similar themes, but amplified with Jupiter there as well. I'm just, as an Aquarius, I'm like, holy shit, I haven't thought of it that way until just now. So this is really groundbreaking on a personal level, but also on a public level. Um, Uranus being square from the fourth house, this is really about cracking you open from the inside out and sharing the parts of you that you thought were too weird to be seen, just going with it, just flying your freak flag and being recognized and celebrated actually for doing it. So that's a positive. I do think Saturn square Uranus in the first and fourth house, it can cause some anxiety. And so you'll want to manage that as you move through next year and manage, you know, that little part of you that's used to being called out for being weird. Um, Even though Aquarians are very cool with being weird, they also want to belong. That's the paradox of Aquarius. They also want to have their tribe. They also want acceptance. And so you're going to reckon with that off and on in the year to come. With Neptune from the second house. Okay, so Neptune in the second house for Aquarius rising is wobbly finances, investment money kind of flowing out the window and not really sure where it's going. So you want to be very conscientious of your spending, because I do feel like there's a burst of enthusiasm, especially the beginning of the year, where you're going to want to just spend it all. But I think you're going to want to really be careful around that because the money is going to be very hard to kind of grasp and hold on to. It's squaring off the fifth house, which does suggest there's a motivation to get creative about your earnings and creative about how you earn money, which is positive. So you're more motivated to use fate. That's something I haven't really talked much about with the North Node, but the North Node is fate. And use that fate in the fifth house. You'll have some fated, maybe pleasurable experiences that indirectly relate to your finances and help you find creative ways. So maybe it's that you're able to mix business with pleasure. Just don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. So I'll have more to say about that in the personal readings for all my Aquarius folks. It's a big, big year for them. But now I'm going to move on to Pisces. And then we're going to probably wrap this up in under 2 hours. So Pisces and Pisces rising, all of this Aquarius energy goes into the Pisces house, the 12th house, which is really the house of spiritual awakening when you've got that alignment there. This is a time a little bit of going into the cave, of going into that, you know, going up on the mountaintop by yourself and having your come to Jesus moment, having that great awakening, because this Aquarian alignment is square Uranus in the third for you, Pisces. You've had Neptune in the first house for years now. And it's really hard for you to kind of get your arms around who you are. You know, what is my identity? What kind of smoke screen do I want to put out there? You know, what do I want to look like? You know, it's very mystical, and it can make you maybe appear to be even more magical than you really are. It can also cause some real confusion around identity. You know, who am I? Where do I belong? Neptune squaring off with the North Node in the fourth house, you know, reckoning with your past, reckoning with some ancestral baggage could benefit you this year and could maybe even clarify some of that Neptunian energy with that square aspect. There's confusion there, but there's also motivation to get to the bottom of the confusion. And I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to, you know, self-exploration is the name of the game in 2021 for Pisces and Pisces rising. Really looking at, where do I live psychologically and where do I live actually physically? And are those things working for me still, or do I need to change where I physically live to understand where I live psychologically? again, I think the situation, your physical space, I'll say this, where you physically are is going to mean more to you this year than it would on the average year. You're going to need to find a place to feel safe and contained and at peace. Now, Pisces is an energetic sponge on a good day, right? With Neptune in that first house for as long as it's been there, you are like a sponge of epic proportions. And you may have really gotten to a place where you need to sit and rest for a while to kind of get grounded and get renewed, to clear all of everybody else's energy out of your field so that you can move forward. And I would say you'll probably get some opportunities late May through the end of July to peek out, to step outside the cave, to come down from the mountain and party a little bit and enjoy yourself. And then you might go back into the cave until the end of the year. And then 2022 is when you really sort of come out in a bigger way. But this Saturn is going to be in that 12th house until spring of 2023 for Pisces and Pisces rising. So you've got quite a bit of inner work going on. Maybe you are ready to dedicate yourself more deeply to being in service of others. Maybe you're ready to dedicate yourself more deeply to philanthropic work, to serving the needy, to working with folks who are suffering in some way. I mean, Pisces, that's your territory anyway, but 2021 really invites you to work with that 12th house energy. So if you are going on a walkabout or on a renewal or on a retreat, that would be one way the 12th house could manifest. Or you are moving into institutional settings where other people are on their own or have retreated, and you're helping them. Those are ways that the 12th house could manifest in your experience. And Uranus in the third is, that's your world view, that's your perspective on your neighborhood, your community, the more mundane aspects of life. You might be traveling, you might find yourself here's one way this might manifest. Maybe a neighbor is a shut-in and you suddenly feel drawn to really get invested in that person and help them quite a bit. Maybe there's a neighborhood calamity or a neighborhood, something that happens in your neighborhood that's unsettling, and you are one of the rescuers. You go in to help. These are ways that 12th house could get activated for Pisces and Pisces rising, but it's definitely a more charitable, spiritual, and what's the other word I'm looking for? I mean, divinely inspired is one way I could say the 12th house could activate you. Yeah. Okay, everybody. So are there any questions or comments on anything? I think that is our presentation. I've really enjoyed doing this for you all, and I will be sending this recording out to you. It might take a little longer than normal because I have actual video editor who's going to create it and make it look professional. So I'm going to be sending that to him, and he will get back to me with the part that I'll be forwarding to you. But I think,
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. So even though next year it sounds like it has some charges, not necessarily negative, but just a lot of energy. With what's coming up this Monday, is there sort of like a relief, I guess you could say, from some of the intensity?
I would agree that there is definitely going to be a sense of relief. I think it's also, it's the winter solstice. It's the darkest night of the year, but it's the darkest before the dawn, right? So it's that moment, maybe we could even say the nadir of this COVID experience, of the Trump years, of all of it. And from that moment, the light grows. So I do feel like it is that epic turning point where we finally move into a place of possibility, and of hope. I don't know that, we're seeing these COVID cases continue to spike. But I do think that this winter solstice, it does feel like a bit of a moment where we launch from. Maybe it's our rock bottom, but definitely having that Saturn Jupiter shift is going to feel more, there's more oxygen in the culture. There's more, it's like we wake up from the nightmare. That's how I would describe the shift from the Capricorn to the Aquarian.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The other question, if I can, is a couple of times throughout, first of all, I love all the ideas of creativity that seem to be coming, especially as an Aquarius. But so when you mentioned money a couple of times throughout, and you talked about saving and just not really being very high risk overall, are there some examples of what low risk ways to still be investing might be?
Well, I definitely think investing in any kind of online education platform is probably a decent one, although because of the instability in the market, it's going to have to be extremely precise how you invest. Definitely anything that you invest that can support the community. So any organizations, either social justice organizations, organizations that serve your neighborhood, or the underprivileged, or are distribution arms of supplies for those other organizations. Those are probably pretty sound investments. I would really encourage you, Chris, though, if that's something you want to look more specifically into, that you look up Ray Merriman, because he has a weekly newsletter and he sells reports. I mean, he is legit a financial analyst and an astrologer, and he really gets down to the nitty gritty. So if you're someone who, for example, does play the stock market, I would highly, highly recommend you look at his website. He sells a lot of different quarterly reports and things like that, and he can give you even to the day of what kind of stocks to invest in.
Okay, thanks so much. I will.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Fantastic presentation, Gina. Fantastic.
Thank you, Lisa.
So appreciated.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And if you listen to this recording and you have comments that you'd like to share, or questions that you didn't know you had, please feel free to email me with those and I can get back to you. I'll be doing my Sunday thing tomorrow if you're interested in those. And I hope you all have a really, really nourishing and calm and loving and peaceful holiday season. And I hope to see all of you on our one-on-one calls. So have a great rest of the weekend and take very good care.
Thanks, Gina. That's great.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
All right.